public session. I want to deal with item number 7, which is a decision we made on scrutiny of EU proposals for the public record. Before the committee proceeds with the business listed, I wish to record the decision taken by the committee on EU legislative proposals from the 6th of November. The committee agreed that EU proposals COM 2018-652, 653 and 658 do not warrant further scrutiny. Full details will be published on the committee's website. Moving to item number 8 then, the progress of the cost of insurance working group. I want to welcome Minister Deasy and your officials to the meeting this morning. And can I invite you to maybe make your opening statement, please?
I wish to thank the Joint Oireachtas Committee for this invitation to discuss issues in the insurance sector. As you are aware, this week the 7th quarterly report on the progress of both report for cost of motor insurance and the report on the cost of employer and public liability insurance was published. It shows that of the 78 separate applicable deadlines within the action plans of the two reports to the end of quarter 3/18, 62 relate to actions that have now been completed. I believe this quarterly report outlines the significant work being done to address the cost of insurance. In this regard, there has been significant progress on a number of legislative fronts, as well as the publication of the second PIC report on benchmarking of awards. While some deadlines have yet to be met, the general direction of travel is positive, and this is reflected in the most recent CSO figures for October 18, which indicates that private motor insurance premia have decreased by 22.9% since peaking in July 16. I will now highlight a number of the key developments which have taken place in the last number of months. The committee will be aware that the Insurance Amendment Bill 18, Act 21 of 2018, was signed into law in last July. This is an important piece of legislation necessary to address the Setanta legacy. The Act provides for the payment of 100% of the compensation due to Setanta third-party personal injury motor insurance claimants, including the additional 35% to those who have settled their claims and have already received compensation of 65% of their claim. The State Claims Agency will apply to the High Court on the 19th of November to obtain approval for payments from the Insurance Compensation Fund in respect of the fourth tranche of payments to the Setanta claimants. I'm hopeful that this tranche of payments will be made to claimants in late November, early December of this year. It involves in the region of 1,500 separate payments with a value of approximately 21 million euros. Another very important step forward is in the work of this cost of insurance working group has been the publication and the completion of the second stage of the Central Bank National Claims Information Database Bill 2018. As you are aware, committee stage will be held on the 29th of November. I'm hopeful that with the assistance of all parties in the House, this bill can be enacted by the end of the year to allow the database to become operational from early 2019. You should be aware that I intend to propose 2 amendments to the bill in order to amend sections 8 and sections 14 of the Civil Liability in Court Act 2004 in order to implement recommendations of the Employer and Public Liability Report. These measures are very important for stakeholders, as when implemented they should make it easier for businesses and insurers to challenge cases where fraud or exaggeration is suspected. As you are aware, the Personal Injury Assessment Board Amendment Bill number 2 has been published by my colleague, the Minister for Business, completed second stage on the 8th of November. Given the importance of this bill as part of the overall reform agenda related to personal injuries framework, I believe that it's important to allow a swift passage of this bill. In many ways, the most significant development over the last number of months has been the publication of the second and final report of the Personal Injuries Commission. This was a key recommendation of the Motor Report, and I'm grateful to the Chair, Mr. Justice Nicholas Kearns, former President of the High Court, and members of the Personal Injury Commission for their careful consideration of the personal injuries framework. In view of the findings of the benchmarking exercise, which indicated that compensation payments for soft tissue injury claims in Ireland are typically 4.4 times that of the UK for similar claims, I would like to note in particular my view that it will be important that progress is made with regard to the development of the judicial guidelines for injury awards. If implemented in the spirit intended, this will be a unique opportunity for Irish society to consider an appropriate rebalancing and recalibration of Irish awards, both in the context of their relative values to each other and comparatively to other jurisdictions. I believe that a significant knock-on effect from such an exercise will be lower premium levels, thus improving the situation for consumers, business owners and society without disproportionately restricting access to appropriate compensation for genuine and seriously injured claimants. Consequently, as the bill providing for the establishment of the Judicial Council is a legislative priority for the Government, I would hope that significant progress can be made towards its enactment by the end of this year. In summary, I believe the implementation of the PIC report is key to fundamentally addressing many of the concerns that people have with the personal injury compensation framework in this country. Since we started our work in 2016, I believe there is a much greater appreciation of the nature and extent of the underlying problems. In particular, publications such as the PIC report continue to influence the public perception of this issue and provide the necessary momentum to continue with this very important project. In addition, I believe that the robust approach being adopted by some insurers to challenging questionable claims is proving successful in tackling fraud, as can be seen in recent media reports detailing personal injuries cases which have been dismissed by the courts after extensive investigations surrounding the circumstances of the claim. This trend is encouraging in terms of tackling the problems of dubious or exaggerated claims from the personal injuries litigation system. These facts on top of the most recent CSO figures showing a almost 22% decrease since peak in July 16 show that the Cost of Insurance Working Group work is making a difference. However, we cannot become complacent on this agenda and can therefore rest assured that I will work closely with my government colleagues and the other relevant agencies to ensure that everything necessary is done to achieve this objective as quickly as possible. Before I finish, Chair, it is clear that there is a number of pieces of significant legislation at different stages in the Oireachtas. I want to ask members of the committee and their colleagues, and I wish to help in the aims to ensure that the most and the maximum amount of floor time in both houses to be made available for these pieces of legislation. And to put it quite bluntly, Chair, that without getting the legislation through now, both houses, as quickly as possible, well then at this stage then we will be slower than we would like. So if anybody has spare time or if they think they want to get the best use of their time, my department is ready, willing and able to deal with these as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Doherty.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, look, we all sat in this committee and we did a report on the insurance industry, and you brought forward your own report. But would you not admit that it's simply not working? And the insurance industry is rolling you over, Minister, in relation to the recommendations. And as this is happening, people out there, whether they're motorists, whether they're consumers, whether they're business people, whether they're involved in the agricultural sector and marts and other areas, are paying astronomical insurance premiums as a result. They're being fleeced by what has been described in Europe and indeed here, and I've said it myself, by a cartel-like activities. And that's not a stretch of the imagination, because we know certain sectors of this industry was subject to dawn raids by European authorities, working hand in glove with their own authorities. Can I just ask you, in relation to some of the recommendations that you are to oversee and implement? For example, insurance industry was asked to display the reasons for their large increases last year. You agreed in a protocol. Now you tell us that following a review by the department, insurers have been asked to ensure this information is displayed more prominently on their websites to ensure the information is accessible and visible for consumers, and the department is going to continue to monitor it. They were to provide then additional information on premium breakdowns to customers. This was a key recommendation of the Oireachtas Committee, and you're telling us now that there's consultation underway. This is the second round of consultation, And we know in the first consultations, the insurance industry complained about costs and making things complicated. Now, these are recommendations number 1 and 2, and they're simply not going anywhere, Minister. If we look at recommendation number 3, extend the current renewal notification from 15 to 20 working days, this has been blocked by insurers complaining about it.
If you want me to go through them each one by one, I will.
Yeah,
but
you can,
if you throw them all at me
you can
once,
respond, because what I'm trying to grab...
I'll probably miss some of them if you throw them all at me.
Well, look, it's very simple. It's 1, 2 and 3 are all being blocked by the insurance industry so far. That's the ladybird version of what I'm saying. Recommendation number 6, protocol to ensure a greater consistency of treatment for returning immigrants. Again, we hear, following a review by the Department, insurers have been asked to ensure this information is displayed more prominently on their website to ensure the information is accessible and visible. Again, they're messing and they're doing the bare minimum. If we look at recommendation number 8, protocol for policyholders to be notified of claims made against them before settlement. Here they're brazenly blocking the Minister. You write to them a year ago, but they're still playing hardball. Something as simple as notifying policyholders of claims made against them, and they are forcing you to go through the route of legislation. And that is the pattern. And that is the pattern of a number of key recommendations in the report, a report that's now over a year ago, a report that many people out there who are paying these premiums just think that it was a matter of getting through an obstacle after the work that this committee has done in shining a light of what was happening in the insurance industry and how people were being fleeced. And the question is when are you going to start playing hardball with the insurance industry? Because it's very clear to me, and it's very clear to my constituents, that they're rolling you over time and time again in relation to these recommendations.
Thanks, Deputy. Well, you're wrong, Deputy, and the figure that is most relevant to this is that the motor insurance premium has been reduced by 23%. So that's something that you can't argue with. So the figures that we accepted from the CSO was the increase of almost 60%, going back to the peak of 2016. Since the peak, there is a reduction of 23%. So you're taking the analogies and the broad statements that you're using about rolling over and all of these things. That figure, Deputy, you cannot argue with, the reduction of 23%. I didn't catch all of the points you're making, but in terms of recommendations 2 and 3, the provision of additional information and extending renewal notification period. Delay in addressing these action points is due to the Central Bank having to undertake a second consultation process in relation to the inclusion of last year's premium in renewable notice. This was completed last September. The Central Bank is considering these responses with the aim of finalising all amendments to a SI number 74 to the end of this year, which will result, it is expected, in insurers providing additional breakdown of the premium breakdown to consumers, including the previous year's premium, and extending the renewal notification period from 15 days to 20 days. So objective here, Deputy, in terms of 2 and 3, was to give people the opportunity to see what last year's premium was. I'm dealing with people at every level, and a lot of people have more than one premium in terms of businesses. So last year's premium will be noted on the premium for this year. So if there's an increase, they'll see exactly what it was. And
last year's premium will be noted on the premium for this year.
That's correct. So
that is not what was requested. That is not what the recommendation is. It is to give a breakdown of premium.
That was an add-on, Deputy, which people have said.
But the question is, one of the key things that this committee determined is that people, and let me make this point, I didn't say that insurance premiums were rising in terms of motor industry. I said they're being fleeced, and they are being fleeced. They're still being fleeced, and the fact that they're dropping by the amount that you've said, that does not take away the fact that they have risen substantially over a period when the government sat in its hands.
Let's deal with the facts.
And I am dealing with the facts.
No, you're making it up, Deputy. What you're trying to do is the increase was.
Minister, I'll have your attention, please.
Sure.
Deputy Doherty has the floor. So when he finishes, you can come back.
One of the key recommendations was to give an individualised breakdown in relation to premiums, so that there would be transparency to this. The idea that you would say, well, this is what I charged you last year and this is what I'm going to charge you this year, is not on. We can all dig out our last premium from last year. It was about trying to make them justify how they were charging for motor insurance, and I mentioned it's not just motor insurance, it's marts insurance, it's fleet insurance. I mentioned to the Finance Committee one haulier operator who went in 3 years, in the space of 3 years, went for 32,000 of an insurance policy to 120 120,000 euro. In anybody's books, that is somebody who's been fleeced by a market which is operating like a cartel. But it takes me back to the questions here. I mentioned, and you said that I'm wrong. Let me say this. In relation to recommendation number 1, it is not implemented. In relation to it has been blocked. In relation to recommended number 2, it is similar. Recommendation number 3, it is blocked by the insurance industry. Recommendation number 6, the protocol doesn't exist. It is now just they're going to put something on their website. Recommendation number 8, in terms of the protocol for policyholders being notified of claims made against them before settlement, again, it's been blocked. Minister, this is just 5 of the first 8 recommendations, all being blocked by the insurance industry. That's the reality. Now, let's hear how you want to spin that, and you want to suggest that things are a lot better for the industry, and that the industry, for consumers, because it's okay for the industry, because they have a minister who is not standing up to them, who is talking about the issues of fraud, and let me say that the issues of fraud are real. But where are you on the issue of fraud? You stand and you make statements on radio and in this committee that you don't agree with the recommendation to set up a privately funded, insurance-funded Guard the Fraud Squad, but you're going to do it anyway. That's not what's needed. What we need is serious action, publicly funded. Let the Commissioner know that the Department and the Government stands 100% square behind them, make the resources available to stamp out fraud, but let's deal with the real issues, which are the recommendations that are over a year old. Minister, you're completely out of touch with what's happening, and you're not playing hardball with these. You're not playing hardball with this industry at all.
Okay, Minister to reply.
Yeah, sorry, Deputy. You're out of touch because you're trying to ignore the fact. The fact is that the average insurance has decreased by 23%. The figure that was increased to the peak of July 2016 was a 60% increase. 60% increase from the CSO. The CSO, the same people who are analysing the numbers, say that there's been a 23% decrease since then. And let's deal with the facts, Deputy, because you don't want to deal with the facts. We have problems within the insurance sector in general, with fraud, with exaggeration, and we have problems with high awards. Those are the facts. Those are what the bulk of the money goes on in terms of when the premium is paid. So the facts are 23%. Maybe you don't agree with the CSO, maybe you dispute that, and maybe I know it's very easy for you to pluck an individual premium out and say it's gone from 30,000 to over 100,000 and say, well, this is the real issue. I have to deal with the average figure, Deputy, and you can ignore it all you want, but there's been a reduction since the cost of insurance working group is established of 23%. 23%. And if you don't mind...
You keep on talking about something I'm not disputing.
No, but you said it's all wrong. I'm not saying it's all right, but it's not all wrong either, Deputy. So we have a huge problem with fraud, we have a huge problem with exaggeration, and we have a huge problem with the levels of awards. That's where the real problems are within the insurance sector within this jurisdiction. So to put it into context, Deputy, the Personal Injury Commission report, when benchmarked with the UK, the level of award for soft tissue, which is 70% of the claims, the number of claims, is 4.4 times what it is in the UK. We have a problem with insurance fraud and exaggeration. In my view, the exaggeration is a much larger issue than the actual number of fraudulent staged claims. And we're dealing with that, as I said, in the National Claims Information Database. Sections 8 and Section 14 will be happening there. In terms of you misrepresented my position in relation to the Garda insurance fraud section, I support that. I don't support it being paid for by industry. I don't support it being paid for directly by industry. But if the Insurance Ireland wish to pay the money into the Exchequer, and the Exchequer passes to the Gardaí, I'm 100% behind that.
Well, let me get the facts. Recommendation number 1, is it implemented or not in full?
Recommendation number 1. So what the recommendation said was that there would be a bespoke breakdown of every premium. And when we analysed that, Deputy, there would be an additional cost in every premium. Everything that we're doing is to reduce cost, not increase cost. and I made this point previously as well, that every recommendation will not be implemented. When we got down into the depth of the analysis, now let me finish, please, let me finish. When we got down into the depth of the analysis, there were implications, there were costs, and then there was overlap of works that were being done also.
Okay. Minister, it took you long enough to come up with these recommendations in the first place. Let me just make that point. So recommendation number 1 is not implemented because, as you said, the insurance industry have said it would push up prices. Recommendation number 2, not implemented either.
Recommendation number 2 is being implemented and will be implemented by the end of the year.
It has been implemented. There's a consultation process on. Is that not the case?
That's finished.
Okay, so it hasn't been implemented.
Recommendation number 2 will be implemented by the end of the year.
So it hasn't been implemented as of yet. Recommendation number 3, has it been implemented?
By the end of the year.
So it hasn't been implemented either. Recommendation number 6, has it been implemented?
Sorry. Returning immigrants is yes.
Is there a protocol?
Yes.
Where's the protocol?
It's agreed between Insurance Ireland and the companies.
So, and are you telling me that the protocol is just put more information on their websites?
The protocol is agreed, Deputy.
Yeah, you told me it's agreed. Is the protocol, the sum total of this protocol to deal with the issue of insurance for returning immigrants, that the insurance industry should put more information on their websites? Is that the sum total of it or not?
Deputy, the matter is concluded between...
Tell us what's in it.
There are more... I have had no complications in the last 4 months in relation to this. In my first period in the job, I had a huge number of representations from returning immigrants. The matter has been concluded with Insurance Ireland and their companies. And
you've told me that. Now tell me what's in it. Is the sum total of this protocol that the insurance industry will put more information on their website?
Department of Finance and Insurance Ireland have agreed a protocol which commits insurance companies to accept claims-free driving experience in another country, subject to appropriate verifiable documentation being provided. The guiding principle is to ensure that a returning immigrant is not treated any differently to any other driver subject to verification. So that's what's agreed, Deputy. You mightn't be happy with that, by the way. You'd prefer to say, oh, it's only on the website. So that's agreed with Insurance Ireland, Department and the insurance companies.
I find it hard to actually figure out what you've read out, what is new from what was there before you launched this policy, you launched this proposal in terms of the recommendation.
Well, there was nothing there before that about returning immigrants. The issue arose during the process.
Let me go to recommendation number 8. Protocol for policyholders notified of claims made against them before settlement. Is that implemented?
Yeah, that matter has to be done through legislation, Deputy. That is not implemented.
Yeah, not implemented. You wrote to them last year and they're playing hardball with you. Let me go to taxi drivers.
Sorry, Deputy. I can't direct them to do any of this. I have to work with them. The Cost of Insurance Working Group, let me explain it to you, because you're probably not aware of what the Cost of Insurance Working Group is. There are 4 departments, of which I chair the 4 departments. There's the State Claims Agency, the Central Bank, the PIA board and others. That's what the Cost of Insurance Working Group is. And I don't have authority over all of them. My job is to work with them, encourage all of these processes through all of these agencies and departments. You seem to think I have a magic wand, say do that, do that, do that. It doesn't work like that, Deputy. In the same way as I can't instruct any insurance company to do what we are asking them to do. I can ask them, encourage them, and bring them along. That's the process that which I'm...
Minister, there's a clear pattern here, and let me go to the last one in terms of the recommendation. I'll say, and I'll finish on this, just one point after this, just if you bear with me. In terms of the taxi drivers, for example, an issue I raised and many others in the committee raised, and I got a call from a constituent of mine, a taxi driver in Donegal. He's a person who has a policy with Liberty Insurance. He's had it for over 10 years with them. He has 2 cars. He has home insurance with them and no claims in relation to any of that. Told them that they wanted to put another taxi, which is great to see, an expansion of the business. They quoted him €11,700. Now, that just emphasises the point that while all of this is happening, while all of the feet draggings happen, people out there are being fleeced. People out there are being fleeced, right? Now, in terms of the plan, there was only one reference to taxi drivers, and that was an advisory committee on small public service vehicles to enter regular discussions with Insurance Ireland to explore solutions for drivers in these sectors. Now, how many times has that met?
Yeah, it's met once, but what has happened since...
18 months ago, a year and a half ago, Minister.
So you don't have to raise your voice, Media.
Well, hang on. I'm raising it on behalf of taxi drivers out there.
My hearing is fine, but if you allow me explain what I have proposed has been a pilot scheme for taxi drivers. We're suggesting 2 pilot schemes where taxi drivers would be prepared to put dash cameras into their vehicle, and the opportunity is there for that to happen. Not just the dash camera, but also the control box, where the vehicles would potentially be tracked by the insurance companies.
Minister, a constituent of mine has been charged €11,700, and the last time and the only time this committee met was a year and a half ago. Now, you can sit there as Minister with responsibility over the insurance sector and say that you're doing a fine job. By God, you are not. You are not, and let me come to the issue of fraud.
I haven't been lobbied by the taxi driving sector about this.
The recommendation is there in black and white.
No, that's fine. I accept that.
Why don't you, as Minister, oversee? Do you not think it's your responsibility to say, why isn't this committee meeting for the last year and a half? This is one of my recommendations.
I'm looking at the opportunity for a pilot programme to try and reduce down the cost to professional drivers. Taxi drivers are professional drivers, and they are higher risk. Those are the facts, Deputy.
Minister, the last final question. Will you ditch the idea of a private industry funding a section of the Gardaí Síochána and do the right thing? And we heard the Commissioner in terms of their concerns in relation to this. Do the right thing. Make sure that your government colleagues support what this committee is looking for, and that is a publicly funded fraud squad within the Gardaí. It is absolutely ridiculous that we are at the end of 2018 and we do not have a fraud squad within the Gardaí. We have raised this year after year. We have heard from the industry and others. We know that there's no prosecutions. When the courts are finding very clearly that claims are fraudulent, they walk out the door. And why wouldn't they? Because there's no such thing as a fraud squad within the Gardaí Síochána in relation to insurance claims. So you've complicated a system by throwing in this idea that we would have, for the first time, that our police service, our Garda, would be funded by private industry instead of doing the right thing, sending a letter to the Commissioner, getting on the phone to him and saying, listen, the government stands four square behind you. Fraud is a real issue. It's not the only issue in terms of the insurance sector. The government will make the resources necessary available to you if you want to establish a fraud squad forthwith. Why don't you do that?
Garda Síochána, Deputy, is the National Economic Crime Bureau. Within that section, it is a matter for the deployment of resources directly. So this is a matter for the guards to do this as they see fit. In terms of what we're trying to do with Section 14 of the National Claims Information Database, is that the opportunity and the pathway which needs to be improved from the civil court, where a judge in a civil court suspects there is fraud, suspects there is exaggeration, that there hasn't been any prosecutions. I think there's been, 6 since the Act in 2004. Now, that isn't good enough. That isn't good enough by anybody who's participating in terms of the pursuit of people who are fraudulent. The people who are fraudulent should be pursued. But that is a matter for the Gardaí, that is a matter for the DPP, and there is a crossover from the civil courts where it then moves into the criminal courts, which is a different space. I'm not satisfied that it hasn't happened, but I do know, and I want to inform you that my conversation with the superintendent in charge of the Garda National Economic Bureau, what has happened is that even before it got to that stage, because of the improvement between the conversation between the Economic Crime Bureau and Insurance Ireland, that claims have been sent to the Economic Bureau and highlighted that the insurance industry believes that some of these claims are fraudulent. The guards have gone to those people are making the claims, and they've informed them that they are now investigating the matter. And the figure that I've been given is that on the basis of the number of visits that have occurred, 2/3 of the claims have been withdrawn. So before it even gets to court, the claims are being withdrawn because the Gardaí are now investigating the matter. So again, you're wrong, Deputy, on the basis that nothing is happening. We are improving the pathways. You want to establish a new section. I don't believe a new section needs to be established.
You want to establish a new section, and you want to, it's in your recommendation. Don't misinterpret it. You want to establish a new section, and you want it funded by private industry. What I'm saying is, let's establish the section. Let's get it up and running.
You also want. I'm fine with if I don't instruct the Gardaí what to do and how to investigate these matters. We have the proposals. I have written to the Commissioner. Commissioner Harris, I have written to him. He hasn't replied back yet. Sorry, he has replied. He is getting his feet under the desk of the Commissioner, which I don't want to be a burden to him. He has huge issues. We've seen what's happened in Drogheda in the last couple of days. And I will be expecting to be meeting the Commissioner before Christmas. So that's the expectation. I will be raising all these matters directly with him, and I'll see what his opinion is at that stage. But again, Deputy, I don't have a magic wand to instruct the Guards, the DPP, the Court Service, the Central Bank, State Claims Agency, PIAB, and the other departments within the sector. It's a big, broad sector, Deputy, and we're moving in the right direction, and you also choose to ignore the reduction of 23%. That's the one figure that you haven't highlighted.
I actually did.
No, you didn't.
I did accept
no,
that. What you're ignoring is that your recommendations are not implemented. You're sitting there as Minister coming in here a year after the fact, and you're completely failing in relation to this industry.
No, you're wrong.
Completely
there are
failing.
62 out of 78 recommendations implemented, but you're ignoring those, so we are. We've done a lot of good work. We've improved the sector. The direction is in the right, the flow is in the right direction, but you want to say it's all wrong. It's not all wrong, Deputy.
Senator Conway Welch, please.
Thank you, Cahir. Most of the questions have been covered at this stage, but I just want to break this down into what it means to the individual consumer and the 23%. So are you saying, Minister, from this and the CSO, that if everything has remained the same for consumers in terms of the vehicle they're driving and everything else, that they can expect to have their insurance premium reduced by 23% this year?
It's the average across all sectors within the industry for motor.
Okay, so if they haven't it reduced by 23%, are we to take it then, if they haven't been reduced by 23% or thereabouts, I mean it might be more than that, are we to take it that they're being ripped off?
No, it's absolutely every premium that's taken out by an individual is a matter for the individual.
No.
And you can call it ripped off if you want, but if I go to a company and have different pricing arrangements, so when I meet the insurance companies individually, we've recently done a mystery shopper exercise with insurance companies. Some companies are double the price of others because of how they price it. You can call it rip off if you want, the Deputy, or Senator, it's a matter for yourself. But each company has a different method of calculating the risk, calculating the price.
I understand that, but the 23% has to mean something to people. The 23% has to mean something to people. So I'm trying to just get a handle on it because I haven't met anyone who's had their insurance reduced by 23%.
Well, I have.
Have you?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Okay, well you're okay. In all honesty, I haven't. I mean, I'll give you an example, even last week. This elderly person, she had a tip with the car she was driving. The other notified the insurance company, obviously, and the car that she tipped into was slightly damaged. Now they went to the garage and it was fixed for less than €100. So she gets her insurance premium request through, and it's doubled. It's doubled. Now, there was no insurance claim or anything like that, nothing. So rang up the insurance, said, you know, have the other party claimed. It was actually doubled. So that's why I'm trying to get to the 23% and what people can expect around this. So you're saying, really, Minister, and I just want to get this clear, people can have a rightful expectation to have their premium reduced 23%. And if that's not happening...
Sorry, Senator, please, don't misrepresent it. The 23% is the calculation by the CSO on the basis of the entire industry of a reduction on average. Now, if somebody is applying for a new premium 12 months later in exactly the same circumstances, there should be a reduction. But companies have different pricing models. Companies are stronger in certain markets than others. Some companies are adverse to insuring younger people. Some companies are very strong with insurance for younger.
Yeah, and I understand, Minister, that, and you see, that's why it's the vagueness and the ambiguity around it and what it actually means for people. I think that's what's causing a lot of the concern and the frustration of the lack of how slow this is taking to impact. And the lack of impact, I suppose that the report and the groups and all that have been set up are, because it's not making a difference in an awful lot of people's pockets.
I have to disagree with you, Senator. As I said, the figure that was used for the increase was the same figure that we're using for the decrease. So as people saw the premium increasing, and they were calculated on that basis by the CSO, the same figures are being used for the decrease. But let's not tiptoe around this. We have 62 out of the 78 recommendations concluded. Some of the remainder won't be done because our analysis is showing that potentially it would cost too much. But we're down to the big stuff now. The big stuff is the National Claims Information Database. That has got to be got through the Oireachtas as quickly as possible. We're down to the establishment of the recommendations from the PIC report from Justice Kearns, where the analysis is the awards are way out of kilter.
You're saying this is almost a job done?
No, what I'm saying is the 23% reduction is because of the 62 recommendations and all of the work that we've been doing by analysing the sector. That's what I'm saying. But there will be a further increase, or further decrease when we get the National Claims Information Database done. Further decrease when we establish, sorry, if you let me finish, when we establish the Judicial Council. And my view is that the first bit of work that the Judicial Council should do is following on from the PIC report to recalibrate the Book of Quantum. Our Book of Quantum is way out of kilter for every other jurisdiction.
All of that, yeah. We've gone through all of that. So
Please
that
don't be
happen?
glib about the...
I'm not
the really,
at all.
No, you are being
Minister,
glib.
Minister,
Yeah.
I really amn't.
Well,
I really
good.
amn't. I'm here to do a job on behalf of the people
And I'm here
that,
to answer those questions.
that I represent, and I want to get to the bottom of why they aren't seeing the impact of all of the recommendations that were made, even the aggregate impact of it, that it is not making a difference in their pockets. Now, we can go back to the 3%, 23%, and I don't want to. But when you deal with averages, you know that that this doesn't mean anything to an awful lot of people out there, and it still seems, and from looking at all of the recommendations, that all of the cards are still with the insurance industry, and that's what we spend weeks and weeks examining here about. All of all of the cards, yeah, are with the insurance company, and that they're not. Now, I take it what you're saying, in that you can't instruct them, but the buck does stop at you, Minister.
Well, let me outline again. We've recently conducted a mystery shopper exercise between the Department and Insurance Ireland. So both entities had a mystery shopper exercise for vehicles over 10 years of age. And the variation was enormous. The variation was double between the lowest and the highest. So that's the variation in the market. Now, again, I can't instruct each individual company how to have their pricing structured based upon their risk models. That's a matter for them. But what is a matter for every individual, and I'm making this point all the time, that unfortunately too many people within Ireland stay with the same company or with the same broker. They never change, and there is much better value out there if they price around and get new pricing opportunities, whether with the broker or directly with the insurance company.
As the Minister, your message to people is shop around more.
My message to people is absolutely shop around more, because as I said to you, the Department of Finance and Insurance Ireland have just concluded a mystery shopper exercise, and the variations was double between the premium. Sorry, for similar vehicles, but that's a matter for the insurance companies themselves. They have different pricing models and they have different target market areas themselves.
I think people will expect and do expect more from a minister
No, but
than being told to
no, excuse
shop
me.
around.
No, you see, please don't try and say that I'm just saying shop around. We have implemented 62 of the 78 recommendations, and that's why you're down 23%. You yourself and your colleague doesn't seem to want to.
Well, my
you seem
insurance
to be
isn't down
ignoring
23%.
to 23%.
You know.
What I'm also saying is now the next big stuff comes along: the National Claims
yeah.
Information Database, the establishment of Judicial Council, the recalibration of the Book of Quantum. That's where I would hope we will reduce it further. I would hope and expect. But unless I get cooperation between both houses with legislation to get these pieces of legislation through as quickly as possible, well then we might get stuck at 23%. I don't know.
The legislation.
Pardon?
Have you published the legislation?
Which legislation?
The legislation that you're talking about?
Yes, National Claims has gone through second stage in the Dáil. The Judicial Council bill is in the Shannon. It is stuck behind the Judicial Appointments bill in the Shannon, where there's been 41 hours of a filibuster in the Shannon. Now, we don't have guillotining, and I don't agree with guillotining, but if we get stuck behind legislation, there's a cost. And the cost on this occasion, Senator, in the Shannon, of which you're a member, is that other legislation gets stuck behind it. So the Judicial Council bill is from the Department of Justice. The Judicial Appointments Bill is ahead of it, and until we get the Judicial Appointments Bill concluded, the Judicial Council Bill won't progress.
So you're saying the Judicial Appointments Bill is holding all of this up, and obviously, and I do acknowledge that it is Fianna Fáil that's and the independents and Labour that's holding that up.
Well,
so
can I just make the point as well? In the Dáil chamber, there's been a filibuster and other legislation. We've only so much governmental time available. That's why I'm asking very openly, very clearly, if any opposition party, whether party or independents, want to make time available to get this crucial legislation through, I'll take it. We're ready to go, Senator.
well, we can work with you. Now, I just want to go to returning immigrants and what difference they can expect. And if you're saying here that they can, that's their driving record is to be recognised.
If it's verified, yes.
If it's verified, and if it's not, if that's not happening.
Well, the agreement is that it has to be verifiable. So if you had insurance in another jurisdiction, it shouldn't be that difficult to get that information and have it provided from the previous jurisdiction.
And if it's verified and it's provided to the insurance company, and the insurance company is still not allowing that or acknowledging that, what happens?
Well, they should be, because the protocol has been agreed between Insurance Ireland, Department of Finance, and as you know, the insurance companies are part of Insurance Ireland.
Okay, but if it's not happening, what happens?
Well, it should be happening.
But if it's not happening?
Well, then it's a matter for somebody to perhaps go to a different insurance company with their verifiable information.
So your message to the McGuinness shop around?
You must always shop around, Senator.
You see, this is the problem.
No, sorry. The problem is you expect me to be able to say, take that individual. I don't have that authority. No minister in any jurisdiction in the European Union has that authority, and that seems to me not computed by your side of the house.
No, I expect you to hold the insurance industry
As we do,
to
and
account.
we've implemented a protocol so that if it's verifiable, the insurance companies should take it into
But the
consideration.
protocol, if you can't hold people to account at the end of the day, the protocol doesn't mean anything.
Pardon?
The protocol doesn't mean anything.
Well, of course it is. It means something.
But if,
Because,
but
well,
if
I can
people
only
don't
again,
have to adhere to it.
When I came into the job initially, Senator, I had a huge number of representations from returning immigrants. Huge number, that they couldn't get insurance. They weren't being quoted. So when the protocol was agreed between Insurance Ireland and the department, and subsequently the companies within Insurance Ireland, I have had very few representations. I don't think I've had any in the last 3 to 6 months.
Okay, so
None.
people need to make representations if the protocol isn't being agreed to, which it isn't.
Pardon me?
Have we a way of measuring if the protocol has been agreed
Well, we have
to?
a number of declined cases, and those declined cases, again, have also decreased significantly.
Of declined cases?
Totally declined, yeah.
And
by
what-
insurance.
Where do those figures go to in declined cases?
They come from Insurance Ireland to department.
And when you say declined cases, do you mean completely declined
Completely declined,
cases? But what about ones that, you know, will give a price, give an enormous price for somebody returning? Are you counting those cases?
No, declined cases where they're not quoted at all.
Not quoted at all, yeah. But you see, it's the ones that are given extortionate amounts or figures, being quoted extortionate figures. So you're not capturing that information?
Well, no, we're capturing all the information, Senator.
For returning immigrants who
returning-
are quoted, you know, thousands of euro for insurance.
Senator, maybe there's a bigger issue in your neck of the woods, but
No, I think
we're
it's an
getting
issue
very
across the
few.
country.
We're getting very few representations from anybody in relation to returning immigrants.
I mean, I don't think anything has changed. I don't think the protocol is having the impact that maybe you assume that it's having.
If people weren't getting insurance, it would be coming back to the department. It would be, because on any occasion there's an issue with insurance, like the 10-year-old cars, the department gets a huge number of representations. So we were previously getting representations about returning immigrants. That seems to have stopped.
So you're saying that's solved as well?
Well,
There's an awful lot.
I'm saying that it's improved significantly.
You might find after today that your number of representations will be
Well,
increased.
and Senator, if that is the case, and so if something that isn't happening and I'm not aware of it,
Yeah.
I want people to make me aware of it.
Okay, appreciate that. I just want to ask you finally, if somebody makes a claim against me this week,
Yeah.
will I know about it? Will I know about it until my insurance premium next year goes up?
No, yes, you should be informed, yes.
So you will be notified of it. So the protocol for policyholders to be notified of claims made against them before settlement. Are you saying that that has been done?
It's not been done, but there's a general insurance companies do notify. There have been cases
Yeah.
where that happen, but we do legislation for that.
Yeah, it's legislation to instruct insurance companies to do that. But in general, insurance companies are informing people that there's a claim against them. So if we want to have it, that they're obliged to do so, it's legislation.
So you have instructed them, or you have asked them to do that. So the protocol is, see, what does protocol mean in the sense? So the protocol is in place for policyholders to be noted of claims made against them before settlement. Is that protocol in place first?
It's not in place, but it's accepted that in general, the insurance company informs the person that there's a claim against them.
But it's a very explicit recommendation within the within
Yeah,
the
and
report.
we have to put legislation in place, Senator, and to do that, to make it an obligation, to make it legal, to give it legal effect rather than agreeing it. And some of these things aren't going to be done, and some of them are going to be done. As I said, 62 out of 78 are concluded.
So when, okay, so you need the legislation. You cannot put the protocol in place without the legislation. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying to make it legally operable, to make it that they are obliged to, an insurance company is obliged to tell.
Can you put the protocol in place? Surely there must be some
The protocol isn't-
goodwill
the
here
pro-
coming from the
The protocol
insurance industry.
isn't agreed. The protocol isn't agreed, but the insurance companies are in general informing people that if there's a claim made
They're
against
not.
them.
You know they're not, Minister.
No, they
They're
are.
not, Minister.
They
They would
are.
agree to the protocol then if that was
Yeah.
the case.
They are,
Sorry
yeah,
for
in general.
Yeah, no, that's, you know. But have they told you, yeah, and I'm really just going to finish on this, but have they told you that they won't accept the protocol?
They haven't agreed to the protocol, insurance.
So
are
they
agreed.
won't accept, they won't accept it, basically.
And if we want to do this, we have to make it an obligation, we have to pass legislation.
So you have to pull them through legislation order. They won't even do that. Like, this is just unimaginable, that they won't even tell people when there's a claim made against them. I think that really speaks volumes,
Sorry,
because I think it's
no,
indicative
again,
of how
Senator,
the
no, again,
insurance
Senator,
industry
you-
haven't been impacted
No,
at
Senator,
all by any of this stuff.
No, of course
Go on.
it's been impacted. Again, there's the misnomer here is I can instruct them to do things. I can ask them. And if I ask them and they say no, we can try and then agree a protocol with Insurance Ireland, which covers only 70% of the sector. And if they say no to that, the only way then is for the Oireachtas to pass legislation.
And they actually have said no. And see, this is quite unbelievable
No, they
for
haven't
people
said
that they
no.
would say no, that they won't
They
give the
haven't-
information to people if somebody
They
wants to
haven't agreed,
claim against
but
them.
most companies have agreed that they will inform claim or the insured person that there's potentially a claim.
See, we have most
Lodged.
companies, and really they don't understand, but when is the legislation, is the legislation prepared for this?
No, it's not, because I've 5 other pieces of legislation ahead of this. Much more important than this. Much more important.
How many pieces?
5.
5 pieces
Yeah,
that are
so
much
we've-
more
we've-
important than this.
Absolutely much. I mean, we can get caught up in that this isn't done, but this isn't the all and end all. That's a very small issue that you're talking about.
Minister,
I have the
Minister,
National, no, hold on, National Claims Information Database. Big piece of legislation to be concluded. We've just finished the insurance amendment bit. I have to say, with your support and help, was passed through both houses very quickly. We have the PIB amendment bill. We have that's with the Department of Justice. We have the Judicial Council bill also. That's with, the PIB bill is with business, and Judicial Council bill is with justice. So they're much more important than that you're talking about. That's a very small, tiny little thing.
Minister, I'm just, why do you think the insurance companies won't do something as simple as telling people when a claim is made against them before they settle it? Why, you know?
In general, it's
I'm
covered,
sorry,
by the Consumer Protection Code. So it's in general, it's covered by the Consumer Protection Code. It's a small little thing that you're raising, Senator. We have much.
It's not.
No, it is. No, absolutely it
Yes,
is.
not.
It is.
To the whole
We have the
job.
National Claims Information Database. We have the fraud database to be concluded. As I said, with the PIB amendment bill, and we have the Judicial Council. That's the big stuff. That's the big stuff. What you're talking about is tiny. Tiny.
For people, they want the
Tiny.
truth and they want
If you
the
think,
insurance
Senator, that
industry
that's the
to-
big stuff,
Senator O'Donnell.
you don't understand what you're talking about.
You want
I
to
think
come in,
the mayor
Senator?
would be worthwhile looking into sometimes, Minister. Seriously.
Well, you have a
Senator,
look at
I think that attack is wrong.
No,
In
no.
fairness, your officials are telling you whether the
Deputy
protocols
Doherty.
are implemented or not.
No.
It seems as if you don't even know yourself.
No, excuse me.
Deputy Doherty.
The big
Then
stuff,
Senator
Senator, Deputy Doherty, is...
Senator O'Donnell, do you want to make a contribution or not?
If I'm permitted.
I've called
I'd
you
be
4 or 5
delighted.
times now,
Thank
so
you,
please.
but Chairman, obviously I want to do it in a climate where we can talk about the
Yeah, there you
topic,
go.
right? Now, Minister, I want to acknowledge the fact that premiums have gone down, but we're still getting a lot of people with issues with premiums, as you're well aware of. The Judicial Appointments Bill going through the Shannon, that's through individuals, particular individuals, right? That happens in the Dáil as well. You could have brought judicial the issue on the second bill through the Dáil initially rather than the Shannon. But let's get down basically to brass tacks. The biggest issue for us here in terms of insurance, and I want to acknowledge the work you've done, but I actually want to talk about facts here, right? The bottom line here is that the biggest issue is lack of transparency. So I want to know with the National Claims Information Database Bill, how is that going to improve transparency? Who will control the database? Who will have access to the database? What information will be in the database? Because what's happening repeatedly with insurance companies is that effectively they go on peaks and troughs. No one knows what profits they're earning. No one knows the makeup of the premiums. I want to know precisely what this National Claims Information Database Bill, and everyone wants to work to get this through. So let's talk, we'll say facts here. What will be in this data bill? This database bill, right? Who will own it? What will be information that will go into it? How quickly will it be up and running? Will the public have access to it? Because ultimately what will bring premiums down, and this is outside of claims, what will bring premiums down is that the insurance companies, there's utter transparency around. And Minister, can I just make a comment? Many of the public out there believe it's not worth their while shopping around. Many of them are elderly. Many of them, at the end of the day, just literally go to their local broker. And their broker is supposed to get them the best value for money. Most of them, actually, in fairness, they do a good job. So can you just talk to us about the National Claims Information Database Bill?
The National Claims Database will analyse the settlement channels. So right now, the numbers that are available to be analysed is that the only figures we have for 100% certain is what's made available in courts. That's about 6% of the sector. And then PIAB on top of that. But a lot of those move through PIAB first and then to the courts. So we don't have analysis upon those settlement channels. There are massive areas, grey areas. So there are some people, some companies, and the business model divergence between the companies is enormous. There are some insurance companies who will settle before there's any analysis done. Some companies settle even prior to medical reports being made available because it's cheaper and that's their business model, and they decided that commercially that's the wisest thing for them to do.
Well, this database, that's about claims, right, and that's very important, right? Will there be any database that will give an analysis of what, on average, individual companies are charging across a range of areas on premiums now?
That's not what this is for now.
No, I accept that. I know that's not what this is for.
Yeah.
But it's the transparency aspect. So what would be in this database?
It will be the entire settlement channels in relation to the sector. So, sorry, here it is. The key objective of collecting the data is to improve transparency and enhance the ability to analyse the relationship between the claim costs and the cost premium. The data specification outlines the data that is required from firms relating to both premium and claims, allied to information on the income and the expenditure of the individual firms. While this has not been fully finalised, the general thrust of the specification is along the following lines. Data to be collected on premium. Premium and policy data for the past 10 years will be collected from each insurer across all private motor insurance policy types. Data to be collected on claims. The aggregate claim information for the past 10 years in relation to all private motor claims, both open and closed.
And just a first point, you spoke about premiums there. Is this premiums in relation to a specific claim, or is it generally premiums?
Premium in general.
Right, so this database is doing a lot more than just claims.
Yeah. The relationship between claims and premium.
Okay, but so when you're looking at it, you'll see a claim, and it'll look at it'll go to the premium. You'll have no general analysis on premiums.
No, it'll be the relationship between the premium and the claims and
and that's for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Will each insurance company be legally obliged by law to provide this information?
Yes.
Can they opt in or opt out?
No.
Okay. How quickly can you get access to the information?
When are we starting here?
Yeah.
Oh,
When will this get up and running?
whenever we get the legislation through both houses, the Central Bank have already done a lot of work in parallel to legislation being prepared and going through the houses.
How quickly will this database be
we hope
compiled?
to be established by Q1 19.
And and who would have access to the database?
The Central Bank.
Only.
The Central Bank can share information to relevant parties.
And so the question I'm asking here is, for us to get to a point where we can see that claims being provided and claims being paid out are, we'll say, in stark terms and in terms of the premium, I want to know is how they can actually bring down the... When you speak about stakeholders, I'm trying to come up with the mechanism by which this will bring about a reduction in claims and a reduction in premiums. And I'm trying to come up as who will this be available? Who will be able to see this database?
So I'll give you an example. There's two areas where we have no sight of. The number of claims that are settled before it's lodged anywhere. So there's an incident, and before...
No, I accept the information deficit. I'm more interested in the user. Who will basically be able to get access to this? So I want to give an example. There's no point in having a database if it's not being used by the correct people.
Sorry, how do you mean by not being used by the correct people?
Well, I mean, it's a database.
Yeah.
Who will use the database?
Well, the industry will have access. The industry will provide information,
Yeah.
and it'll be made available to industry. So we'll be able to see the effect between the claims and the premium.
Will we have access to it?
Individuals?
Yeah.
No.
Will the obviously Central Bank will if you have a case being taken, we'll say someone comes in and takes an insurance claim, for argument's sake, I'm a policyholder I have a motor insurance policy. I'm involved in a car crash where I'm actually not I'm effectively, someone is taking a claim against me. Will I be able to see, I'm just trying to figure out how this will manifest itself in bringing down in, like, what purpose will this database have?
The information isn't claim by claim, Senator. The information is the aggregate from each company. So the information will flow to the central bank that company X has had settled X number of claims for 22% before they entered the system. Company Y has gone through PIAB, and before it gets to the courts, that it's settled on the steps of the courts, all that type of thing.
Except I'm going to stick to a single issue. This is all I'm going to look at.
Sorry.
For me, I still don't understand who will actually use the database in terms of bringing about transparency in about bringing down the value of claims, which should then bring about the reduction in premiums. So I want to know, when this is compiled by the central bank will control this. How will this bring about a reduction in claims, and how will it bring about a reduction in premiums on the basis of transparency? If this is just a bookkeeping exercise by the central bank, it's of no use. So I need to know effectively how this will benefit in bringing down. This, first of all, will bring about transparency, and transparency only works if people can see it.
The issue here, Senator, is that we have so many claims that we don't know why they're being settled. Some of these claims potentially shouldn't be settled. That from a commercial basis it might make sense to the insurance company to do so.
This is really for use by the insurance industry.
This will be for the insurance industry and the analysis for policy of how we drive policy subsequently.
Within the central bank and the Department of Finance.
And Department of Finance.
Okay.
The hope and expectation is that a lot more of these would go through PIAB, which would be concluded through PIAB following the PIAB amendment bill.
And then, finally, I welcome the thing on Setanta, right? When the payments are made in late November, early December, will that bring a conclusion for all policyholders in Setanta?
No, it won't be concluded at that stage.
What will still remain?
Yeah, so the people who haven't settled their claims with the liquidator, those are out of our control.
Okay, and when
so the people who have settled, I think the figure was 1,500
payments.
15 payments made by the 19th of November.
So, and that would bring all of those up to date?
Yes.
Okay. All I'm really saying, Minister, is very simple, really, for me. We talk an awful lot about insurance. Ultimately, if you've a database which analyses all this information, and if we're back here again in a year's time, and effectively this database is just trundling along, and there needs to be resources put into it that it's up and running pronto.
Yeah. Well, just put into context, Senator, so if the analysis is done and we see that 40% of claims are being settled without any medical reports, well, then there's a policy decision by others to make.
And finally, do you expect to have a database up and running by the end of Q1 next year?
No, we expect it to have started by then. Yeah, so that the information, when the legislation is passed, the information then will be requested from the companies, and they're obliged to provide it
and
to the central bank.
Any idea how long before it becomes a functioning database?
Yeah, we're expecting at some stage in Q3, we think. Yeah. It's going to take a bit of time.
Well, then finally, Minister,
the reason we're only going with motor is because it's specific to one
Can I ask that whatever resources, a dedicated unit will be established in the central bank, and whatever resources are required at any level, put into this particular process to be up and running as quickly as possible. Because ultimately, this is where, in my view, the major strides can be made.
Yeah, that's been done, Senator.
Senator Harkin. Thanks, Deputy Senator.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, Minister, for your opening remarks. I studied them carefully, and a lot of the points have been covered. But Senator Donald is right in terms of lack of transparency. I mean, that is the thing that is most frustrating for people. I don't know of anybody yet who's told me they've seen a 23% reduction in their premium, and I have met people who have seen plenty of increases. Now, admittedly, I'm happy to acknowledge that if your premium comes down a lot, people aren't necessarily going around talking about it. But if the average is 23, there should be people on 46 and 47% reductions, and I've certainly not heard of any of those. And I would take issue with Senator Conor Walsh, who I mentioned to already, in relation to the Judicial Appointments Bill. My party has not contributed 41 of the hours of speaking time, and I think if you analyse the speaking time in any fair way, you will have it down to one or two individuals, as Senator O'Donnell pointed out, and neither of them are in my party, in terms of the speaking time. And it is the business of the government and the leader of the Seanad, as you well know, as a former member of the Seanad, to schedule the time. And if they want to schedule other things rather than judicial appointments, they're free to do so, as we do every week. Lots of business has got through, when business has needed to go through the Seanad quickly. In many cases it has. You know that, Minister. I've facilitated you, my party facilitated you, as have other parties. So a particular piece of legislation can't be used as an excuse for everything else to be being slowed down. I don't think that's fair.
Respond to that, Senator, if you don't mind, Chair. If there's a piece of legislation going through with a department, they're not going to lodge another piece until that section is concluded, until that previous piece is done.
Well, other departments do.
Not very often.
It happens. I mean, we have various pieces coming in through other departments, and they're dealt with. And this particular bill, lots of people have problems with it. There are many amendments. I've chaired far more hours than I've spoken on it. I'd say I've contributed about 15 minutes to it. It's not my brief.
Senator, it's not a criticism of Justice Shannon. When filibuster is happening, other legislation gets delayed. And it's a criticism.
You can try and make that point, and I'm not saying it's not a point that you can make, but certainly it's the business of the government to schedule business. And if they want to schedule something else in advance of judicial appointments, I'm sure, in the benefit of lots of people, if we're in agreement with it, it can be done very quickly. We have a piece of legislation, the Greyhound Racing Bill Racing Board Bill going through, and it's been dealt with extremely quickly because it's a matter of priority for that minister, it's a matter of priority for the government, and we're all happy to see it go through. And lots of other pieces of legislation have gone through very quickly. So I think it's a distraction rather than anything else, and I'll leave it at that. What I am more interested in is to know about, you mentioned the National Claims Information Database can be hopefully through the House. When will it actually go live? When do you anticipate it going live, collecting information? And exactly for the people watching in who may not be as familiar with it as some of us are, what will it actually do for people? We say it's an industry thing and the people won't have access to it, but what do you see as the actual benefits to the Irish public ultimately of this particular legislation?
We find ourselves in the dark on far too much of the settlement channels. So as I say, we have access towards the court settlements and the pipe settlements, but the vast majority is settled without knowledge, without access to anybody except the individual and the insurance company. So when you aggregate all of those up, we don't know what the percentage is in truth. So when you aggregate the channel...
What?
Pardon?
The percentage of what?
Percentage of total settlements are settled out of court, on the steps, pre-PIAB, after PIAB, after PIAB, or even settled before there's any form of a medical report requested. So we don't have access, we don't know what percentage it is. So
we know that, what will it do?
Insurance companies don't have different, as I said, have different settlement models. And I've spoken with all of them. And the unusual thing is, it varies between some companies settling before it ever even gets lodged, to make an offer of X amount of €1,000, matters concluded, finished. Other companies are the other end of the spectrum, which they will fight you every step of the way, even people who are legitimately injured, even people who they know have been impacted, and they will fight you every step of the way. And then you have everybody else in between. So what we don't have sight of is those channels. So the example that I use is, say we find out 40% of claims are settled before there's any medical report requested. Well, then there's an issue. Then there's an issue that insurance companies are settling without any form of medical evidence, and then potentially policy.
Actually get to see that information.
That'll be a matter for the department, central bank, and the industry itself.
When you say it's a matter for them, what do you mean by it's a matter?
The people who make policy decisions will have sight of that.
You're talking about the actuaries and the various people.
Not the Department of Finance.
Okay, so the Department of Finance are going to see on a company by company basis.
It's aggregated data.
So you will discover that on an aggregated basis that 30% of claims are settled before any, just to get rid of them. But you won't necessarily know which companies are the offenders.
But if the percentage is high or unusually high, well then, the department will have decisions to make. Potentially we might have to insist that all claimants have to provide a medical report. It's just a hypothetical scenario. I don't know, but that's...
I just don't want us to be kind of putting all our faith... I don't want us to be putting lots of faith in something. I mean, I want it to happen, and I want it to be because I think it can be of benefit. But I'm trying to establish in my own head, and presumably other people looking in might want to know, what is it actually going to do? Is it just an interim measure before you start introducing? Is it an interim kind of analysis so that you can then go off and start implementing other policies? Or
we don't have any analysis of the settlement channels.
Well, I think we did. And you were a member of this committee at the time we were looking at motor insurance 2 years ago. I think we did seem to have information that 70% of claims didn't even get to PIAB, 20% got to PIAB, and 10% were settled in the courts. So I think we did somehow know those figures. I don't know how we knew them.
Those figures were given to us by the insurance sector, but we don't know if they're accurate. What we're doing is putting on a statutory footing a structure that we will have full analysis, full details of the aggregate data. The hope and expectation is that subsequent to that PIAB will have a higher percentage of claims entered and concluded within the PIAB process, rather than a settlement prior to PIAB. Or what is happening in some occasions is that people just use the PIAB award as a ceiling, or a floor, I should say. And then we say, now we'll go threatening the court and we'll see can we get more in court, so that we know we have a minimum amount of X via PIAB.
Okay, so this database, you're hoping will be through both houses by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And when will it go live? When will it be commenced?
We're expecting at the end of Q1 for the information to have been transferred from Insurance Ireland for the previous decade.
Into the central bank, and they will start doing and producing. And will they produce any reports for the public or for the general public or ourselves or whoever? Will we ever see anything that goes into that?
We're expecting the analysis 6 to 8 months after that.
When you say
Central
we,
Bank, Department of Finance.
okay, but that won't be published.
Well, it will be published, yeah.
It will be
the aggregate data.
Yeah, so we that's the point, that the general public can see aggregated data of the National Insurance Database. And when will that first report, when would you anticipate that first report being published?
The end of Q3, we're thinking sometime around then.
Of 2019?
19.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of, and I'm very conscious we've talked a lot about motor insurance, and motor insurance is incredibly important, but equally there's public liability and various other things. We did talk before, I think I might have been in the chair at one stage when you were kind of saying, look, if we want to have high payouts, we have to have high premiums, more or less. I won't say get over it, but that's the way it is. And there is this very large window of the time when people can allegedly, or maybe actually have an incident, but maybe not even have an incident, and then walk into a licensed premises or walk into a restaurant or a nightclub, 1 year, 11 months and 30 days later and say, oh yeah, 2 years ago something happened here. Lots of the staff will have changed. GDPR will have required them to have got rid of all their CCTV footage and so on. How do we tackle that particular part of...
The Section 8 of the Civil Liability in Court Act, we will be altering at committee stage of National Claims Information Database. So you will be aware that any video footage, any imagery from a premises, because of GDPR, it has to be deleted within 1 month. So what we're doing is we're reconciling the period of time in which people have an obligation to inform the owner of the premises that that imagery or footage can be stored safely so that the individual can have a proper defence. Section 14 of that Act.
What will that actually do? Will that mean that people can keep 2 years' worth of footage, or that people have to make a claim within a year?
No, that they will keep the footage on the basis that potentially there's a claim and that they can keep that as evidence.
But I suppose
further defence.
people are in a position, if something happens on the 1st of January 2019, they can walk in on the 30th of December 2020 and say that something happened. And they don't have to say it before that.
No, they do. So we're reconciling the period of time to 1 month, in which they have to give somebody the opportunity that they can store that footage, keep that footage.
Okay, so people now have to
And
make...
the section 14, which
Just,
is
I
the
just
same
want to,
act.
sorry, Minister, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
So you're now saying that if somebody wants to make a claim against a premises, a restaurant, a public house, a cinema, whatever, they must do it within a month of...
No, they still have the same period of time, 2 years. But what they have to do within 1 month is to give the individual who is the owner of the premises the opportunity to store the footage, because otherwise the footage by law will be deleted.
And if they
Section
don't...
14 is that there's an inference taken against the individual that they didn't adhere to that portion of the Act, and that inference will be against the claimant.
Okay, so that's, I think,
Pardon?
I think that is at variance to what you would have said at a committee maybe 6 months or a year ago, where you said you thought it was fine that people mightn't have, want to have 2 years or might need that time to not come in.
There's two different time schedules, Senator.
Yeah.
One is the period in which you have to tell the person who is potentially mounting a defence against you, so that they can store the imagery. That's because legally now, GDPR states you must delete it. So the second period of time isn't changing.
I accept
in which
that.
period of time somebody has potentially the opportunity to make a claim.
But I think that is, I mean, and it's in your opening statement, you should be aware that I intend to propose 2 amendments to the bill. So that would all be incorporated in the bill that you hope to have passed through both houses by the end of the year. And you might ask the leader in the channel to make sure that he can table it ahead of judicial appointments, and we'd be all happy to take it in advance of judicial appointments if we're still talking about judicial appointments by the time it gets to that, and there's every possibility we will be.
Judicial appointments comes from justice. This is coming from finance.
Great, all the better. Just in terms, I mean, you made a point earlier, and I think you did the last as well, about exaggeration is much greater than fraud. I mean, I still want to put on the record again, exaggeration is fraud. I accept that it's a form of fraud, and that there's blatant fraud where nothing happened, or it's a staged accident is one type of fraud, but exaggerating a claim is still fraud. Exaggerating your mileage is fraud. No, exaggerating your... if you lost a coat and you say it's the coat that was 10 times the value of the coat you lost, that is fraud.
No, also, you're right. You're partially right in relation to that. An exaggerated claim is, in my view, where somebody is impacted through no fault of their own.
Correct.
Whereas fraud is trying to establish an event, trying to plan an event. There is a bit of a difference. That's
your interpretation. I still think that if you deliberately put down something that isn't true,
I
it's
accept
fraud.
that. No, I accept that.
An exaggerated claim is still fraud, in my opinion, and I think in most people's opinion.
My point about it, Senator, is that for most people, if they're exaggerating a claim, most people haven't tried to plan an event, haven't tried to plan an accident, that they have, through no fault of their own, been impacted. They may exaggerate the claim, and depending upon the level of exaggeration would really be the level of fraud involved.
Look, I mean, I know people who ran events and the others said there was never a coat lost, there wasn't a brand new leather jacket, this kind of thing, the cloakroom ticket, and it was never a battered old whatever. So that, to my mind, if somebody puts down something on their form and looks for more money than they're legitimately entitled to, I think we should not be calling it exaggeration only. It's a form of fraud. It may not be as blatant or as awful as fraud, but it is. I mean, fraud is fraud. Exaggeration is a form of fraud. Blatant staging of accidents is worse. Where somebody drives into a pothole at 2 miles an hour and says something happened.
Exaggeration is, in my view, that's an opinion, doing more damage than fraud, than the actual staging.
Volume-wise, you're saying there's more claims that are being paid. Exaggeration is costing more than blatant fraud, and I'm not disputing that could be the case.
And then that's also, in my view, because of the high levels of award. So if the levels of award were much less, people would be much less likely to try and exaggerate a claim.
Okay. The Garda Fraud Unit, where are we with the Garda Fraud Unit. At one stage, you were in this committee and you did say at the think of the time that you didn't want guards being taken off real crime to deal with fraud. I mean, as we think we've established, fraud is real crime. And
No.
look, you know, I'm not saying we should be taking everybody off gangland murders and putting them on Garda Fraud, but I think Garda Fraud should, a Garda Fraud Unit, and indeed, Pádraig Ó Céadaigh had a bill about perjury in the Shannon recently at second stage, and equally Billy Kelleher has private members down in terms of dealing with people making fraudulent claims and people being able to be pursued for fraudulent claims.
Yeah,
in terms of the Garda Fraud Unit, where are we?
In terms of the Garda Fraud Unit, it's a matter for the Commissioner. As I said, I've been meeting the Commissioner. I can't instruct him to do this. It's a matter for the Commissioner, how he...
Can you ask him to do it?
I can ask him.
And are you going to ask him to do it?
Yeah, I'm going to ask him to do it, to establish a section within the National Economic Fraud Bureau. And as I said, there's €1 million. I've always been in favour of that. I've never been in favour of the industry paying the Gardaí directly.
No, I heard
I'm
you
on
say
the
that,
record for that for quite some time. Again, it's to be discussed with the Commissioner. But in terms of...
And when would you like to discuss that with the Commissioner?
Well, as I said, I hope to meet the Commissioner before Christmas.
Okay. And you don't have any indication at the moment from the Garda Commissioner or
I
any...
don't.
And I accept it's a new Commissioner. In terms of...
But I also made the point that I didn't, the previous occasion that I presented here, I didn't think it was appropriate for the previous Commissioner, who was an acting Commissioner, to make that decision. And
Okay.
I think that was appropriate as well.
Okay, I'll take that point. The wording of these amendments, the Section 8 and the Section 14 amendments that are going to go into the National Claims Information Database, are they published yet?
They're not, yeah, they're not published, but they're in line with what we had in the cost insurance.
And when do you think they will be published? So that
Well,
people...
we're the 29th of November is when we're making committee stage.
So they'll be tabled, I suppose, a day or so in advance of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Here, look, I think I'm nearly finished. Just in terms of Billy Kelleher's bill, I mean,
Can I make a point as well?
what's the government's...
We've
can they
analysed
support
section,
it?
yeah, we've analysed section 25 and 26. So in terms of perjury, and in terms of the sanction, the bill that Senator Ó Céadaigh is bringing forward is actually, the sanction is less in his bill than this bill. So the National Court, yeah, no, yeah, it's separate. It's specifically to establish an insurance fraud. Oh yeah, linking 25 and 26. There is a difficulty there because
When you're talking about Section 25 and 26, you're meaning of...
the National Court, the court's liability and the Civil Liability Court Act 2004. That's you're using, the difficulty here is you have the civil courts with a criminal sanction. So it creates a problem, and I'm not sure that it's something we can get over.
And can you propose some form of amendment that would allow
The point about it is that we've analysed section 25 and 26. The sanctions are sufficient. The sanction in question in 25 is 10 years in jail or €100,000 fine.
And in order for the Section 25 26 to be used, I mean, is it the Gardaí or the insurance company, or who has to really bring it forward?
Yeah, the issue here has been the referral pathway from the civil court, where the independent person is a justice of the state in the civil court, that if that person suspects fraud, that it isn't for the DPP to investigate, it is for the Gardaí to investigate. So that's the issue. So then the issue here then is the crossover between the civil courts and the criminal courts. But we have improved the pathway, and we expect that the pathway will reap some rewards.
I mean, I think it's important. I just finished now, Curly, thank you. Just to make the point, Minister, in conclusion, you know, if somebody goes into a bank and tries to rob it and they get caught, they will be prosecuted. They will probably suffer jail time and so on. Maybe not as much as some people would like, but there's a sanction if they don't get away with it. If an insurance claim, you put one in, and we see them literally week in, week out, and it's good that insurance companies are fighting them, and it's good that judges, thankfully, in some cases at least, are throwing them out. But people are putting in spurious, fraudulent, exaggerated claims over and over again. And if all of a sudden they just withdraw them because they've discovered that they were doing mixed martial arts, or they were skiing, or they were doing whatever, and there's nothing happening to these people, and then they go off and do it again.
Point, Senator, that the era of insurance fraud, insurance exaggeration being a one-way bet is coming to an end. And it will come to an end, and people who are chancing their arm will be sanctioned. And as I said, the sanctions are sufficient. The sanctions are actually higher sanction than what are being proposed in Senator O'Keefe's bill.
But in terms of Senator Keller, you're probably, or Deputy Keller's bill, you've one issue with it, but you're not against the Trustees' bill.
I don't think I'm not sure that it can work.
Okay.
Senator
Thanks.
Burke.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Very briefly, not going over the ground that other members have touched on. Just to continue on what you have said there, Minister, particularly in relation to PIAB, where claims are made, they write in, it's at no cost to the person making the claim, whereas the person that's defending or the person that has the insurance has to defend it all the way up, and then it's a fraudulent claim and it's thrown out, and there's nothing done to the person, and it hasn't cost them any money either. But the person defending, it has cost a lot of money defending themselves, and maybe their premium may well rise as well. But it should be something that should be looked at.
When you say there's no cost, Senator, if they go to court, there's a cost.
There's a cost if they go to court,
Yeah.
but if there's a settlement with PIAB,
yeah.
all the way up along, there's
Yeah.
no cost at all involved.
Yes.
But there's a cost to the person the
Who's
insurance
defending
holder, because they have to defend themselves the whole way up along. They have to employ a solicitor or barrister or whoever else.
Yeah, there is a bit of an issue, and it's something that has to be said. Not all claims are fraudulent or exaggerated. And while we speak a lot about fraudulent claims and exaggerated claims, most claims are legitimate. The biggest issue in insurance is the level of awards for the lower level claims. That's by a country mile the bigger issue. And while I know people want to talk about the fraudulent or exaggeration, the issue is that people will pursue claims much more so because of the level of the award. So if Justice Kern's analysis is that it's 4.4 times what it is in the UK, and if somebody's getting 10,000 in the UK, they're getting 44,000 here. So it's very lucrative and it's very worthwhile for somebody to pursue a claim. Whereas they won't put the same effort and energy into claiming or pursuing a 10,000 euro claim. That's just the way of it. And the level of award is encouraging people to keep progressing, pursuing a claim.
In relation to the 10-year-old cars, has the department found out why the insurance companies have decided on 10-year-old cars? Why is it not 8 years or 10, 12 years or 15 years or 20 years?
I put that question to all of the insurance companies, Senator, and they all say that their analysis, their data shows that cars of 10 years or over produce higher claims.
Is that because of third party or comprehensive or?
It's a multitude of reasons. It tends to be older drivers, it can be younger drivers, and a number of other factors. So what they've said is on older vehicles may have a greater risk of injury due to its lack of safety features also. So the newer cars with airbags and new technology tend to have less damage, and the costs are higher.
An issue that was raised here during when we were doing the report into insurance was the high cost of legal costs. Has the department come up with any suggestions in relation to that? Because the legal people refuted everything that we put to them here at the committee.
It's not an area that it's part of our remit, but part of the National Claims Information Database will be that analysis to show how much of it actually gets to the claimant. And the hope and expectation is with the National Claim Information Database, knowledge and information for the future, that people will more likely settle in PIAB if the awards are, when the awards are lower. So they won't see it as lucrative to end up in court, to pursue it in court and then have a big payday.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks, Senator. Minister, just to clarify a few points you've made. First of all, in relation to the market itself, have we had any new insurance companies come into the market?
No, I think we've lost 4 in the last 7 years.
So we've lost 4,
There are people coming in,
Yeah.
not necessarily
Yeah.
from this market.
Yeah.
and there's no interest.
Well, it's
At present, is
the
there?
market up until 2 years ago was loss-making.
Yeah. So, just to go back to the committee's report, we were talking at the time about the fee to access information was €10,000. And Insurance Ireland confirmed the full membership fee as being 100,000 across all members. Have you investigated that with the insurance companies? Have they relented on any of their on their approach to collecting these fees?
It's a matter for the Competition Authority, and I can't comment.
Okay. The 23%, I'm not going to get into an argument with you about that. It's a figure, an average figure of increases. But as you said earlier on, you're dealing with facts. So that may be a fact. But it's also a fact that taxi drivers, truck drivers, those in vans, driving for their business and so on, their insurances have not gone down. I'm saying this as a fact, relative to a real trading business. That is a fact.
Relative to it.
Those that are trading in business,
Yeah.
and I'm
Driving for
personally aware,
driving for a living. Yeah.
their insurance costs have not gone down. And if anything, they have found it more and more difficult to deal with insurance companies.
The CSO figures are about private insurance,
Yeah,
private car
I think we should
insurance.
make that
Yeah.
distinction.
Yeah.
So what can taxi drivers, truck drivers, van drivers, what can they expect?
As I said to you, I did raise the matter with insurance companies about taxi drivers, and that there is a company who's prepared to do a pilot program if taxis are prepared to use dash cams, if they're prepared to use the black box for the analysis to show that their drivers are driving responsibly. The issue here, Chair, is the levels of awards against full-time professional drivers. The levels of awards by a country mile, the biggest issue in insurance is our levels of award. For small incidents where people in other jurisdictions would be considered for a couple of €1,000, in Ireland they can get 10, 15,000 for very, very small incidents. And Deputy, that's the biggest issue by a
Well,
long
my
way.
background is transport.
Yeah.
And the numbers of people that contact me on a regular basis about massive increases in their premiums, and they have no claims record. But yet the insurance goes up, and it doesn't just go up by a small amount of money. We can talk in percentage terms, but that clouds the issue of the actual cost. How many euros? It could be double.
But that's exactly why, Deputy, everything that we're doing is to try and reduce the levels of awards.
Yeah, well,
The issue is the level of award.
What I'm doing here is just clarifying a few points
No,
before I get
understand,
to the policy aspect.
and I think you're bang on. But the issue here is there are more claims against professional drivers than any other sector. And when you have more claims and you have higher awards, unfortunately, there are now only, I think, 2 companies who will insure taxi drivers. So now you're down to a lack of competition.
Just to make a point about public liability, because I met with
Yeah.
2 different sectors within that one sector, Dublin pubs and then the rural
vintners.
publicans.
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible to do business with the level of public liability insurance costs, particularly for small pubs.
Yeah.
So whether you had a claim or not, your insurance is going up, your cost is going up within a business that has an extremely tight margin. And I'm just pointing out to you that That is a fact. It is true that they're all in difficulty in terms of their insurance and insurance costs. And while we're sharing these facts this morning that have not changed, I'm sharing those facts with you.
I'm
and
aware.
People are looking to you and this committee, you know, for some sort of hope, even for the short term.
Yeah, I'm aware of those facts also, Deputy, and the issue here is, again, somebody can have a small incident, a small claim, a small damage, and they can claim for very large amounts of money. And if they keep pursuing it, and they lengthen the process out for years, in which the insured individual, the insured premises, has that claim on their books, it becomes a commercial reality, it's cheaper to pay it. And that's because, again, it goes back to, again, the level of award, and it's been very lucrative
Okay,
for
which
somebody
brings
to
me
pursue
to
it.
the point of, you know, policy and the work that you're doing and the work that this committee is doing in presenting our document, which I believe to be a very valuable piece of work, which didn't get the government credit I think that it should have got, from the point of view of highlighting an awful lot of the issues. But I want to just bring your attention to, you said earlier on that the cost of putting information on the renewal forms, you know, it was costly for the insurance companies. You don't tell me you don't accept that.
I do accept that. Now, prior to sitting down with the
With
insurance company,
all the technology that we have.
yeah, well, the amazing thing is, Deputy, and I was unaware of this, that the insurance sector is very paper-laden. It is a paper business still, even with all the technology that we have. And I would have said exactly what you're saying prior to coming into this job, prior to sitting down with the insurance companies. There will be an extra cost if we have to do that. And everything that you are doing with your committee and your report, and I'm trying to do, is to reduce costs and not add costs.
But is that a bluff on the side of the, not on your side,
yeah.
on the side of the insurance
I would have said what you were saying before I came into the job and before I met all of them. I would have said exactly that, but it is not a bluff. It is a very paper-laden business where it's each document is one by one, person by person, handled by individuals, and it goes up the line for their underwriters.
Okay, you go on then to say that you can ask, but you can't instruct. So, and again, I'm just asking this, is it that the government or the system, regardless of who's there, is it that they're afraid that they're going to lose insurance companies? And is it a fact then that the insurance companies are relying on that position of fear in order to increase their own profitability and protect a market that is acting like a cartel?
Well, I'm not going to comment about markets acting like cartels. As I said, there's an investigation ongoing. I have to also be cognizant of that part of the role is to try and have companies come in and create competition. And part of that is that companies should be profitable. Up until, I think it was 2 years ago, the insurance companies in Ireland weren't profitable. Prior to that, we were losing insurers. And that meant that there are some sectors who only have one insurance opportunity, and that isn't even here. And some sectors, they have to be insured out of London. And that is a difficulty for the entire sector, Deputy. And I have a balance to strike, which is to protect the consumers. But equally protecting consumers, I have to try and have a competitive market. And as I said, up until a couple of years ago, companies were in significant loss.
But once you have Insurance Ireland charging these type of fees, preventing newcomers from interrogating the information that should be available there for them in the context of the market, and the fact that you can ask but you can't instruct, that all of these are, you know, real issues that are preventing the market from expanding, and the insurance companies are quite happy to tolerate that.
I won't be commenting on that. As I said, there's a an investigation. But the National Claims Information Database will be up and running next year. And any potential insurer who wants to come in will have access to that.
Okay, well, can I come to that then? Senator O'Donnell was making the point that I'm going to make now, which is a customer a relevant party? Is this committee a relevant party? You were mentioning relevant parties to, in the context of access to the database, and you were saying that people who make policy decisions, if that database is to be worth anything, surely it should be a case-by-case, claim-by-claim register. But that's what it should be. And the Department of Finance seems to be against that. And a claim-by-claim register would inform the public as to why their policies are going up. It would inform the industry. It would inform potential entrants to the industry here in Ireland. And it would give maybe greater customer information in a general way. And they don't want to do that.
We've chosen not to go with a claim-by-claim register, Chairman, because of the cost. So we are implementing the National Claims Information.
Who, Minister, sorry?
Pardon?
Who would bear that cost?
Well, I would expect it would fall back on the customer.
You see, the argument seems to be all the time that you can only ask, you can't tell, costs of insurance companies. And quite frankly, it comes across as if it is the insurance companies that are being minded here, and that the customer is the one that carries the can, regardless of what happens. And even to go back to the earlier point about cameras and so forth, to do with taxis and trucks and vans, even that cost is borne by the van, by the owner. You mentioned, was it 2 pilot projects? Pay for themselves. So the insurance company in Ireland, insurance companies in Ireland, or Insurance Ireland, are really making no real effort, it would seem, to engage with you.
Yeah, I don't agree with you, Chair, and I'll tell you why. This isn't an attractive market for insurance. If it was an attractive market, we'd have a lot more insurers in here, operational and being profitable. It's not an attractive market because the book of quantum in Ireland is a multiple times what it is in the UK.
Cartel. Maybe that's the reason for it.
Well, I'm of the view that Judge Nicholas Kearns' analysis of 4.4 times, the analysis that the department have done as well, ranging between 3 and 5.5 times, and then last week there was the third piece, the PIB analysis, that the awards are 5 times. I mean, if somebody's getting 5,000 in the UK, they're getting 25,000 here, tax-free, and it's very lucrative. So even the best of people who have been impacted, who through no fault of their own, will pursue a case because the PIB or the book of quantum is in the level of the threshold that they're at. And that's why this market is not competitive. That's why you don't have 15, 20 insurers in this market. And without those, and I will say this, Chairman, I'm no person here who's protecting the insurance companies. On every occasion it comes to my attention that there's an issue, I bring them in. And I put the hard line to them. And the hard line is, the latest occasion was in relation to the cars over 10 years old. Previous occasion to that was how insurance companies are dealing with their clients following Storm Ophelia and Storm Emma. Consumer protection is very high in my threshold for the job that I do in insurance. Make no mistake about that.
To deal with that, and Senator O'Donnell mentioned earlier on, consumers feel now that it's absolutely useless to shop around. He made that comment, and I want to agree with him, because I've shopped around.
I have to disagree with that.
But I've shopped around and given you a fact.
Yeah.
And I know you can take single cases,
Yeah.
and single
And
cases
I know
don't
that
make
too,
up the norm.
But we
actually,
didn't,
there's too many cases.
Yeah, we didn't take single cases with the 10-year-old cars and the mystery shopper by both Insurance Ireland and by the Department of Finance. So all 8 companies were asked by 2 different sections, and the gap was double between the lowest and the highest. So shopping around, that's just an exercise done within the last month by Insurance Ireland and by
And what was that relevant to? Was it relevant to private?
the 10-year-old cars and the levels of quotation by insurance companies
For cars?
for, motor insurance.
Yeah, just the motor insurance?
Yes. Now that's just that sector in the last month.
But the point is, the rest of them are being ripped off. I put it to you that they are being ripped off, and that it's not just.
Sorry, how do you
it's
mean
almost a blatant cartel.
how do you mean the rest
That's
of
the feeling you get about it, and you can turn nowhere.
Chair, the rest of them, non-motor, is it?
Yeah.
Well, that's
It's staggering what's happening out there, and a non-motoring. Well, a motoring is going to affect person going to work, and all of that sort of thing, costs the family, and all the rest of it. Whereas the commercial side of it, if you like, taxis included, they're going to affect people in their pockets.
Business,
So it's not right. The balance is just simply not right. And again, I would say to you, I'm not critical of the work that you're doing and your officials, but someone has to tip that balance somewhere in favour of businesses that are finding it difficult, publicans, taxis, truck drivers, van drivers, the whole lot, because that's what the economy is turning on.
Again, Chairman, and I'm doing the job for 16, 17 months now, it's the level of award is driving the costs.
Insurance Ireland, what kind of cooperation, how would you characterise the relationship between
Insurance,
you, the group, and Insurance Ireland? Are they forthcoming with all of the information that you require, or are they dragging their heels?
they're average.
And does that not point to where the problem is?
No, Insurance Ireland are there as a lobby interest group for insurance companies. My role as Minister with responsibility for insurance is to highlight areas that are brought to me where there are difficulties, and I'm doing that. And I think perhaps the era of, the insurance sector itself, where the information was kept, was hidden, wasn't provided, was dragged out of them kicking and screaming. I think the insurance sector knows that with the implementation of National Claim Information Database, with the fraudulent database, that the sector is changing, and it has to change, and it'll change for the good. But, Chair, and I don't want to be overly repeating myself, the issue that's driving costs in insurance is the level of award, and they have to come down.
To go back to the committee's report, in the report we talk about the period between 2007 and 2012. So insurance company effectively broke even according to the figures that are available. Some years profits were made, other years losses were recorded. But from 2012 to 2014, insurance companies incurred significant losses. So that bears out your thinking on that. However, taken as a whole, insurance companies amassed profits totalling €2.86 billion from 2002 to present, and that present was the date of our report, 2016. Now, that's a reality. That's figures that have been presented.
Yep.
And the data from the central bank's blue books show that motor insurance companies made €3.1 billion in profits from 2001 to 2012.
2001, Deputy, is almost 20 years ago. And
No, but you have to start somewhere.
No, I know, but
and 2012 was not 20 years ago.
No, but I'm making the point also that these insurance companies deploy capital, and capital is very fleet. If a sector within industry is doing poorly, so agriculture or marts or taxis, and there's losses in a sector, and the capital that's required to underwrite those is loss-making, they will say close that book and we'll leave. And that's part of the problem that we have. For a period of time, the levels of awards were so high in this country that the insurance companies went into loss.
Well, I'll finish on this. I'm going to say to you that I feel that I'm representing the insurance, those that are looking for insurance, your standard citizen, people that we represent, and companies. And I am of the opinion that it's a cartel-like operation, that they've made significant profits according to the central bank, and that they are desperately reluctant to come forward and cooperate with you and the government to try and achieve a more balanced marketplace. And until such time as they are actually taken on, the same way as they are taking you on, and the government and all of us, they'll just continue to do what they're doing. I agree with you about the cost of claims and so on. And yes, you can deal with all of that. But I think the insurance companies and Insurance Ireland have an awful lot to answer for. And they're getting away light. They're getting away very light.
Say in response, Chair, that everything that we're doing is to reduce premium. We've 62 out of 78 recommendations concluded. Some of them won't be concluded because upon analysis we think it's either going to be too expensive or not going to give the effect that we had hoped and anticipated it might have done. We want to be very clear that the 23% reduction is welcome. We wanted to reduce further. We want to move into those other sectors, but we're getting into the real big stuff now, Chair. And your committee, the role that you play and the role of both houses play in the next 3 to 6 months will determine the level of competition in the market, will determine how we can get the market onto a strong, stable footing where it isn't spiking with large profits and then dropping to losses. And that's something that is important to remember as well. But just, I do want to finish on one thing. The consumer protection side of insurance is very important to me. We've done 2 reports in the last 6 months in relation to consumer protection, how the industry operates with their clients, external to fraud, external to exaggeration, external to exaggerated claims, and external to high awards. And we're looking at that, we're prepared to look at that, and make no mistake, I'm on the side of the consumer, along with you, Chairman. And the work that we can achieve together in the next 6 months, I'm hopeful we will get National Claims Information Database done before the end of the year. We can get the Judicial Council bill to both houses before the end of the year. We can get the PIVE Amendment bill done also. And without those last few bits, Chairman, I won't say all the work that we've done today will be for naught, but these are the really important bits next.
Well, can I suggest to you that if your officials would look at our report again and review their position as it was back in 2016 on each of the recommendations, just to see if, that there's now a different view maybe on the recommendations that you thought might not work. Because I'm going to recommend to our next meeting of the committee that perhaps what we should do is initially write to all of the stakeholders again that made submissions here, Age Action, anyone that's affected by it, just to get their update on what they now perceive to be the position out there. So we're going to do that and perhaps invite back in Insurance Ireland, because I think that nothing much has changed in spite of your best efforts and the best efforts of your officials. And I think that will put further pressure on the industry to perhaps focus more intently on the need to settle the matters that are outstanding. And could I say to you in terms of legislation and Central Bank National Claims Information Database Bill, we didn't do pre-legislative scrutiny on that in order to get it in before the committee.
I do want to acknowledge that, Chair.
And 29th of November is the date.
Yeah, and I also want to acknowledge the help of the finance spokespersons for the Insurance Amendment Bill. And those are the examples of the Oireachtas being helpful. But I am highlighting that we're in a queue to get into the Dáil Chamber and in the Shannon Chamber for other legislation, and filibuster has an effect that other legislation gets shoved backwards.
Yeah, well, I think people might take an initiative from the whips in relation to that dilemma, because everyone wants to see this sorted.
Absolutely.
So my thanks to you and your officials
Thank you, Chair.
For coming in, and the matter is now, the meeting is adjourned. It's seen a day. Thank you.